Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Solutions with Chanti, in the field with Chanti, where we are broadcasting from the heart of the Ankara field. Welcome everybody, and I hope you are having a fantastic week so far. The weather has chilled a bit somewhat here, which is very nice. Wow, we've had quite a drought here. And it's been broken, like literally. It was my birthday on Tuesday. I think it was maybe Saturday, Sunday, on the weekend. Sunday started. Saturday I was at the beach. Sunday. So, great to have so much rain though, but quite chilly. Hope you guys are well. And today we're going to be looking at part 2 of the podcast, The Land of Milk and Honey. So last week we listened to the first 20 minutes or so of this podcast, but we kind of slowed it down, right? We noticed how ancient language is introduced, kind of almost poetic, symbolic, evocative almost. Also, where I want to say where metaphor begins leaning towards actual mechanism, right? And we also obviously are in the process of not deciding too quickly. So it's really just a process of seeing how this lands with you. How does it make you feel? And of course, your body will always know, because your body is the resonance chamber. So I believe, like the phrase land of milk and honey is kind of layered in many ways, because the ancient texts present it as containing hidden biological insight, right? More like symbolic language. But yeah, it's kind of, I believe it really is more metaphorical, and it's gradually been reframed as anatomical. So yeah, let's see, because I think the two always go hand in hand. But it's also important to separate metaphor, theology, physiology, speculation, So let's have a look. Part 1 is about how narratives begin, right? And today we're watching how they develop. So that's it. Well, let's begin. Enjoy.
Closing the eyes. Silencing the ears, stilling the body. The father in secret is the electromagnetic frequency generated in darkness, in silence, in the absence of external stimulation. The third ventricle, the crystal palace, fills with cerebrospinal fluid only when attention is withdrawn from the external world. This is why every mystical tradition emphasizes the same practice: darkness, silence. Inward focus. The techniques vary, but the physiology is universal. Kundalini does not respond to force. It responds to the removal of resistance. Pharaoh, the ego, must release its grip. The Red Sea, the raging emotions, must part. The waters must divide to create a dry path through. Pineal, the experience is unmistakable. Gamma coherence produces specific phenomenology, bliss without external cause. Clarity without mental effort, the sense that the walls of ordinary perception have collapsed. Colors become more vivid, sounds more distinct. The boundary between self and environment becomes permeable. This is the land flowing with milk and honey, not a destination reached once, a state returned to monthly. A frequency learned and sustained through discipline. The spine's 33 vertebrae are the ladder, the seed is Jacob. And the angels ascending and descending are the electrical impulses traveling the Ida and Pingala channels, the two serpents of the caduceus, the two olive trees of revelation, the two witnesses who cannot be killed until their testimony is complete. The entire exodus is occurring in the body, right now, every month. The opportunity to leave Egypt, the solar plexus, and enter Canaan, the illuminated brain, cycles with the moon. The question is whether the individual will preserve the seed or waste it on the altar of flesh. But this physiology, this monthly resurrection, raises an obvious question. If the process is this central to Scripture, why does the literal story collapse under the slightest archaeological scrutiny? The literal interpretation has a fatal flaw. It cannot survive contact with the ground. In 1948, Israeli archaeologists began excavating the sites described in Exodus. They expected vindication, physical proof of the conquest, evidence of the 40 years in Sinai, confirmation of Joshua's campaigns. The nascent state needed its founding mythology verified by science. Instead, they found nothing. Professor Zeev Herzog of Tel Aviv University published the results in 1999. His summary was devastating. Egyptian documents make no reference to the sojourn of the children of Israel. The Sinai Peninsula shows virtually no occupation evidence for the entire second millennium BCE. Not a single campsite, not a single burial ground. Not a single pottery shard from the period, when millions supposedly wandered there for 4 decades. Numbers chapter 1 records the census taken in the wilderness. Verse 46, even all they that were numbered were 600,000 and 3,550. That figure counts only males aged 20 and above. Extrapolate to women, children, elderly. The total exceeds 2.5 million. This would have constituted the largest population movement in the ancient world, larger than the standing armies of Egypt, Assyria, or Babylon. A nation on the move, traveling with livestock, possessions, the Ark of the Covenant, the tabernacle. And they left no trace. Kadesh Barnea, where the Israelites allegedly spent 38 of their 40 years, presents a specific test case. Numbers 13 describes it as the staging ground for the spies' reconnaissance of Canaan, the encampment where an entire generation died in the wilderness. Archaeological surveys identified the site. Excavations began. The findings: Kadesh Barnea was uninhabited prior to the early 12th century BCE. No remains from the late Bronze Age, the supposed period of the Exodus. Nothing from the 13th or 14th centuries BCE. The site was empty. The population numbers create additional impossibilities. 2.5 million people require water. The Sinai Desert cannot support that number. Even with miraculous intervention, manna from heaven, water from rocks, the logistics collapse. Where did they eliminate waste? How did they organize movement? A column of 2.5 million traveling single file would stretch over 500 miles. The biblical text itself contains the contradiction. Exodus chapter 13, verse 17. And it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest peradventure the people repent when they see war, and they return to Egypt. The Philistines did not arrive in Canaan until the 12th century BCE, after the supposed Exodus. The text anachronistically references a people group that did not exist yet. A scribal error revealing the story's later composition. Jericho presents the most spectacular failure of the literal reading. Joshua chapter 6 describes the conquest. 7 priests carrying 7 trumpets of ram's horns, marching around the city once per day for 6 days. On the 7th day, 7 circuits. The priests blow the trumpets. The people shout, and the wall fell down flat so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. Kathleen Kenyon excavated Jericho in the 1950s. Her findings were unambiguous. The city was destroyed around 1550 BCE. The walls fell, the city burned. But this destruction occurred centuries before the conquest timeline established by 1 Kings 6:1, which dates the Exodus to approximately 1446 BCE. During the actual conquest period, between 1400 and 1200 BCE, Jericho was a small, poor, insignificant settlement, unfortified. No walls existed to collapse. The population numbered in the dozens, not thousands. Herzog stated it plainly. Joshua could not have knocked down Jericho's walls because there was no Jericho there at the time, and no walls. the conquest narrative describes systematic destruction of Canaanite cities. Hazer, AI, Lachish. Systematic archaeology has examined every site mentioned. The pattern is consistent. Either the cities were unoccupied during the conquest period, or they show no signs of violent destruction at the required time. Israel Finkelstein, professor of archaeology at Tel Aviv University, summarized the consensus. Most modern scholars believe that the Israelites were indigenous to Canaan and did not come from outside. The Merneptah stele, dated to 1207 BCE, provides the earliest extra-biblical reference to Israel, an Egyptian victory monument. The relevant line, Israel is laid waste, his seed is no more. The determinative hieroglyph marks Israel as a people group, not a territory. They were already in Canaan, not arriving, already there. Then there is the fertility problem. The promised land was supposedly flowing with milk and honey, a fertile paradise worth 40 years of wandering. But geographical analysis contradicts this characterization. Multiple sources confirm the land of the Bible is not an especially fertile land. It is located on the edge of the desert. Canaan sits between the Mediterranean and the Arabian Desert, a narrow strip dependent entirely on unpredictable rainfall, no major river systems. No guaranteed irrigation like Egypt's Nile or Mesopotamia's Tigris and Euphrates. Egypt, by contrast, enjoyed reliable annual flooding. The Nile's inundation deposited nutrient-rich silt across the floodplains. Agricultural abundance was virtually guaranteed. The Israelites were supposedly fleeing this abundance for drought-prone marginal land that experienced regular famines. The Bible itself records these famines. Genesis 41, Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dream, predicting 7 years of famine that would strike Canaan so severely that people would travel to Egypt for food. Ruth chapter 1, and it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled, that there was a famine in the land. Naomi's family fled Bethlehem for Moab because of starvation. The land flowing with milk and honey experienced repeated famines severe enough to displace entire populations. And the final absurdity, during the supposed Exodus period, Canaan was part of the Egyptian Empire. The Amarna letters, diplomatic correspondence from the 14th century BCE, document Egyptian control over Canaanite city-states. Egyptian garrisons occupied the territory. The Israelites would have been fleeing Egypt to conquer land administered by Egypt. The entire narrative is geographically, chronologically, and logistically impossible, unless it was never meant to be history. Paul himself identified the interpretive key. Galatians 4 verse 24, which things are an allegory, for these are the two covenants, the one from the Mount Sinai which gendereth to bondage, which is Agar. He explicitly calls the Old Testament allegory. He uses Sarah and Hagar to represent spiritual principles, not historical women. Origen of Alexandria, writing in the 3rd century, argued that Scripture intentionally contains impossibilities. He wrote, divine wisdom introduced into the middle of narratives certain impossibilities and incongruities, that the very difficulty might summon the reader, and as it were, force him to investigate what lay beneath the surface. The impossibilities are not bugs, they are features, markers. Signals to the initiate that deeper meaning lies beneath the surface narrative. The literal story cannot survive because it was never designed to. It is a shell, a husk, the outer court where the masses worship. The esoteric meaning, the Holy of Holies, is accessed only by those willing to abandon geographical literalism and recognize the body as the true temple. Egypt is not a country. Mitzrayim means narrow places, the constriction of consciousness in the lower chakras, the solar plexus. The realm of survival, emotion, reactive patterns. The bondage. Canaan is not territory. It is the elevated state, the brain operating at gamma coherence. The promised land accessed through the raising of kundalini energy from the solar plexus through the 33 vertebrae to the pineal gland. The Red Sea is not water. It is the turbulent emotions that must be stilled before crossing. The raging internal weather that drowns Pharaoh's army, the egos pursuing thoughts, when consciousness finally escapes their grip. The 40 years is not chronological time. It is the duration of transformation. The gestation period required to transmute base consciousness into illuminated awareness. The wandering is internal. The journey is through the wilderness of the mind. And the land flowing with milk and honey is not fertile soil. It is the brain state achieved when the pituitary's white magnetic secretion and the pineal's yellow electrical current flow in perfect harmonic balance. But if the biblical writers encoded this physiology in narrative, they also embedded it in the stars. The cosmic map mirrors the cranial geography, with precision that predates Christianity by millennia. The astronomical code predates Christianity by millennia. Cancer, the fourth sign of the zodiac. At its center sits the beehive cluster, Praecipe in Latin, Messier 44 in modern catalogs, visible to the naked eye as a hazy patch of light. Ancient astronomers called it the manger. The Babylonian name for the constellation Cancer was Nangar. The carpenter, the manger where Christ was born, sits astronomically in the house of the carpenter. This connection existed 1,000 years before the Gospels were written. The birth narrative is not history, it is stellar encoding. The implications are staggering. The nativity story, the infant in the manger, the shepherds, the stable, maps directly onto a specific region of the night sky. The manger is the beehive cluster. The stable is the constellation Cancer. The birth occurs when the sun enters this celestial house during the summer solstice period, but the birth is not of a historical person. It is the birth of consciousness, the activation of the pineal gland, the spiritual seed in the cranial manger, the upper brain. The place where the Christos is born every month when the lunar cycle triggers the release of the sacred secretion. Greek mystery traditions encoded the same knowledge through different symbols. They called their priestesses melici, bees. The word derives from meli, meaning honey. These women were not beekeepers. They were initiates into the mysteries of consciousness transformation. The bee does not create honey from nothing. It gathers nectar from flowers, raw material from the external world, and transmutes it through an alchemical process in its body. Enzymes break down complex sugars. The bee fans its wings to evaporate water. The result is honey, concentrated, preserved, transformed. The pineal gland operates through the same principle. It gathers raw sensory data from the external world during waking consciousness. During sleep, during meditation, during the withdrawal of the senses, it processes this data. It distills it. It transmutes base perception into illuminated gnosis. The association of bees with prophecy and divine wisdom spans cultures. The oracle at Delphi was called the Delphic bee. Priestesses at Ephesus, devoted to Artemis, were melici. The Hebrew word Deborah means bee, and Deborah in the book of Judges is a prophetess, a source of divine guidance. Honey represents immortality because it does not decay. Archaeological excavations in Egypt discovered sealed jars of honey in ancient tombs, still edible after 3,000 years. The preservation is perfect. This is why honey was forbidden in burnt offerings. Leviticus 2, verse 11. You cannot burn that which represents eternal preservation. You cannot destroy transformation itself. The Milky Way extends the astronomical encoding to a galactic scale. Gala in Greek, the root of galaxy. The word means milk. Ancient observers saw the band of stars arcing across the night sky and interpreted it as milk spilled from a divine source. The Romans told the story of Juno nursing Hercules. The infant pulled away, milk sprayed across the heavens, creating the Milky Way. But the older tradition is more precise. Jewish mystical texts call it Nehar HaEsh, the river of fire flowing from the throne of God. Daniel 7, verse 10. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The river of fire is the Milky Way, the celestial counterpart to the Jordan River, and the Jordan, the descender, is the spinal cord. The channel through which the sacred secretion flows from the cerebrum to the solar plexus and back again. As above, so below. The maxim is not metaphor, it is a statement of correspondence. The macrocosm reflects the microcosm. The stellar map mirrors the cranial geography. The cosmos is the brain projected outward. The brain is the cosmos internalized. Chalev, the Hebrew for milk, shares its root with cheleb. Strong's H 2459, the richest essence, the choicest portion of the sacrifice, the fat reserved exclusively for God. Not ordinary dairy, not animal product, the finest substance in the offering. When Scripture commands that the fat be burned on the altar, it encodes the consumption of the sacred secretion. The offering of the clostrum's oil to the divine fire of consciousness, the sacrifice that produces illumination. Etymology reveals the encryption throughout. Joseph's occupation is given as tekton in Greek, translated universally as carpenter in English Bibles. But tekton does not mean woodworker, it means builder, constructor, architect. The root appears in words like technology and architecture. It refers to construction of structure, not cutting of lumber. Joseph is the builder of consciousness, the pineal gland that constructs illuminated awareness from raw material. The electrical principle that shapes perception, the masculine fire that activates dormant potential in the brain. The nativity itself encodes the monthly cycle. Mary, the pituitary, carries the seed. She is a virgin because the process is parthenogenetic, self-generating. The seed does not require external fertilization. It releases from the cerebrum on its own lunar schedule. Joseph accompanies her to Bethlehem, the house of bread, the solar plexus, where the birth occurs in a manger, the cranial beehive cluster under the sign of the carpenter. Shepherds watching their flocks represent the 12 cranial nerves, vigilant, attending to the neural sheep, the flock of electrical impulses. When the angels announce the birth, when gamma coherence begins, the shepherds come to witness. The nervous system responds to the activation of the pineal. The three wise men following the star encode the triple convergence required for illumination. The pineal honey electric, the pituitary milk magnetic, and the claustrum source. 3 glands, 3 gifts. Gold solar essence, frankincense aromatic activation of the olfactory nerve connected to the limbic system, and myrrh bitter preservation, the discipline required to maintain the seed. Herod's slaughter of the innocents represents the ego's attempt to destroy the nascent spiritual impulse. Pharaoh, the lower mind, seeks to kill the seed before it can mature. The threat is internal. The enemy is not an external king. It is the reactive patterns, the addictions, the lower impulses that dissipate the oil before resurrection can occur. The flight into Egypt reverses the Exodus narrative. The Holy Family flees to Egypt for safety. Why? Because Egypt, the solar plexus, is also the place of gestation. The seed must descend into the lower body. It must die in Egypt before it can rise. The contradiction in the narratives is intentional. It signals that geographical literalism misses the point. The entire zodiac encodes the 12-stage journey of consciousness through the year. Aries, the ram, the sacrifice, the beginning of the cycle at the spring equinox. Taurus, the bull, the stubborn flesh that must be overcome. Gemini, the twins, the duality of spirit and matter. Cancer, the crab moving sideways, the indirect path to the manger where birth occurs. Leo, the lion, the solar fire, the heart chakra activation. Virgo, the Virgin Mary, the harvest, the pituitary. Libra, the scales balance, the equinox of equal day and night. Scorpio, death, transformation, the scorpion's sting, the crucifixion. Sagittarius, the archer, aiming upward, the ascension. Capricorn, the goat, climbing the mountain, reaching the heights. Aquarius, the water-bearer, pouring out the spirit, gamma waves flooding consciousness. Pisces, the fish, the symbol of Christ, swimming in the waters of cerebrospinal fluid. The zodiac is not fortune-telling. It is a 12-month physiological calendar. Each sign represents a phase in the annual cycle of consciousness evolution. The sun's apparent movement through the constellations mirrors the soul's journey through the body. The ancients were not primitive. They were precise. They embedded neuroanatomy in mythology, physiology in theology, science in symbol. They created stories impossible to believe literally, forcing initiates to look deeper. They scattered astronomical clues like breadcrumbs leading back to the body. The beehive cluster still sits in Cancer. The Milky Way still arcs across the night sky. The moon still transits through the zodiac every 29.5 days. The code has not changed. Only the ability to read it has been lost, until now. The knowledge means nothing without application. The circuit is mapped, claustrum to pineal and pituitary, the differentiation into honey and milk, the monthly descent of the seed down the 33 vertebrae, the 3-day death in the solar plexus, the potential resurrection. The question is whether the individual will preserve it or waste it on the altar of flesh. Track the moon sign transit. Every 29.5 days, the moon moves through the birth sun sign. This is the window. The seed descends. For approximately 3 days, it remains vulnerable in the lower body. During this period, the entire mechanism can be destroyed or preserved based on behavior. The preservation conditions are not suggestions. They are requirements. No sexual release. The reproductive system and the nervous system draw from the same reservoir of vital energy. The Chinese call it Jing. The Sanskrit term is ojas. Western physiology lacks vocabulary for it, but the mechanism is observable. Orgasm creates massive electrical discharge. The battery drains. The capsule protecting the seed breaks. The oil spills. This is why every mystical tradition, Christian monasticism, Buddhist celibacy, yogic brahmacharya, Taoist sexual alchemy, emphasizes conservation of sexual energy, not from moral prudery, from physiological necessity. The seed cannot rise to the pineal if it is dissipated through the reproductive organs. No alcohol. Ethanol is a solvent. It dissolves cellular membranes. It breaks down the protective coating around the seed as it travels through the body. The ancient priesthood was explicitly forbidden to drink before entering the temple. Leviticus 10 verse 9. Do not strong drink thou nor thy sons with thee when ye go into the tabernacle of the congregation, lest ye die. Not a moral commandment, a technical warning. The seed dies in the presence of alcohol. The mechanism fails. Entry to the Holy of Holies, the activated pineal state, becomes impossible. No gluttony, excess food ferments in the gut. The fermentation produces alcohol internally, the same destructive effect as drinking, but from within. Refined carbohydrates and sugars feed the yeast colonies in the digestive system. These microorganisms convert sugar into ethanol. The body becomes a fermentation tank. The seed dissolves. This is the hidden meaning of fasting. Jesus fasted 40 days in the wilderness before beginning his ministry. Moses fasted 40 days on Mount Sinai before receiving the law. Elijah fasted 40 days before encountering God on Mount Horeb. The pattern is consistent. Fasting clears the fermentation. It purifies the internal environment. It creates the conditions for the seed to survive its journey through the lower body. No violent emotion, rage, fear, envy, hatred, covetousness. These states create electrical chaos in the nervous system. The frequencies become incoherent. The signal degrades. The seed cannot maintain stability in a field of electromagnetic noise. The vagus nerve, the pneumogastric, connects the brain to every major organ: heart, lungs, stomach, intestines. It is the primary channel of the parasympathetic nervous system. When violent emotion triggers the sympathetic response, fight or flight, the vagus becomes a conduit for destructive discharge. The seed traveling through this nerve during emotional upheaval cannot survive. This is why Scripture repeatedly commands, "Be still and know that I am God." Psalm 46, verse 10. Stillness is not poetic. It is the requirement for maintaining neural coherence. The promised land is entered through the stilling of the emotional Red Sea, not through crossing it while it rages. The 3-day window demands absolute discipline. Bill Donahue called this keeping the Sabbath, not Saturday worship, not Sunday church attendance. The physiological discipline of ceasing lower activity so the oil can complete its journey. The Sabbath is the seed, the rest from flesh that allows resurrection. Enter the silence. Meditation is not optional. It is the delivery mechanism. The method of consciously shifting brainwave states from beta, ordinary waking consciousness, 14 to 30 Hz, down through alpha, theta, and into delta. Delta waves, 0.5 to 4 Hz, facilitate the descent into the pia mater, the innermost membrane where cerebrospinal fluid is produced. This is the deepest level of sleep, the state where the brain performs its most profound restoration. The seed must sink into these depths to gather the material for resurrection, but meditation is controlled descent, not unconscious sleep. It is the practice of entering delta while maintaining awareness, witnessing the descent, riding the wave down into the silent depths and returning with the treasure. Gamma waves, 25 to 140 Hz, facilitate the ascension. Peak awareness, the upper limit of measurable brain activity. When the seed rises to the pineal and triggers DMT release, gamma coherence floods the brain. Bliss without cause, clarity without effort. The walls of ordinary perception dissolve. The practice is simple. Not easy, simple. Shut the door. The instruction from Matthew 6, verse 6. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. The closet is the skull. The door is sensory input: sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. These channels constantly feed external stimulation into consciousness. They prevent the internal generation of light. The door must close the eyes, not just lowering the lids but drawing attention away from the visual field, withdrawing from the internal screen where images still play, sinking beneath the surface of mental activity. Silence the ears, not just external noise but internal commentary, the voice that narrates, the dialogue that never stops. The mental radio must be switched off. Still the body, not just sitting motionless but releasing muscular tension, allowing gravity to hold the form, surrendering the constant micro-adjustments that maintain posture. The body becomes a vehicle at rest, the engine idles. The Father in secret is the electromagnetic frequency generated in this darkness, in this silence, in this stillness, the internal light that appears only when external light is banished, the sound that emerges only when external sound ceases. The third ventricle, the crystal palace, the cave of Brahma, fills with cerebrospinal fluid only when attention withdraws from the external world. This fluid bathes the pineal gland. 30 micrograms of melatonin enter it daily. But under specific conditions, prolonged darkness, deep meditation, the preservation of the monthly seed, additional compounds are secreted. DMT, the spirit molecule, the chemical basis of mystical experience. Raise the oil, not through force, through the removal of resistance. Kundalini does not respond to effort, it responds to surrender. The snake coiled at the base of the spine does not ascend because it is pushed. It rises because the obstacles are cleared, the channel opens, the resistance disappears. Pharaoh, the ego, the lower mind, must release its grip. The pursuing army, the reactive thoughts, the habitual patterns, the compulsive behaviors, must drown in the Red Sea of stilled emotion. Only then can the Israelites cross on dry ground. The passage is not comfortable. The 3 days in the tomb are real. The dark night of the soul is not metaphor. The seed dies in the solar plexus. Consciousness descends into apparent unconsciousness. The light goes out. This is the test. The temptation to indulge the flesh during this vulnerable window is overwhelming. Sexual desire intensifies. Hunger increases. Emotions become volatile. The body screams for release. The mind invents justifications. The ego fights for survival. This is Herod seeking to kill the infant Christ. This is Pharaoh refusing to let the people go. This is the devil offering kingdoms in the wilderness. The resistance is internal. The enemy is the accumulated patterns of a lifetime demanding continuation. But if the seed is preserved, if discipline holds for 3 days, the resurrection occurs. The oil rises back up the spine, through the medulla oblongata, into the third ventricle to the pineal gland. The stone the builders rejected becomes the chief cornerstone. The silent gland activates. Gamma waves flood the brain. The experience is unmistakable, spontaneous bliss, causeless joy, the sense that a veil has been lifted. Colors become luminous, sounds become crystalline, the boundary between self and environment becomes permeable. The realization dawns that consciousness is not produced by the brain but received by it, that the brain is an antenna, not a generator, that the self is not contained in the skull but extended through the field. This is the promised land, not a destination reached once and maintained forever, a frequency returned to monthly. A state cultivated through discipline and practice. The land flows when seeking stops, when the desperate search for external salvation ends, when the recognition dawns that Egypt was never a country and Canaan was never soil, that the entire exodus is occurring in the body. That the journey is not outward through space, but inward through states of consciousness. The walls of Jericho fall when the attempt to breach them from outside ceases, when the circling stops being physical march and becomes mental circumambulation, when the 7 circuits are recognized as 7 chakras. When the trumpet blast is understood as the sound current, the eternal Om, the Amen, the word that was in the beginning. The promised land does not require a passport, it requires meditation. Conservation of vital energy, patience to let the sacred secretion complete its monthly journey from claustrum to solar plexus and back again. Discipline to preserve the seed during its 3-day death. Courage to enter the darkness and wait for the light to generate from within. The ancients encrypted this knowledge because power of this magnitude cannot be given. It must be earned, through sacrifice, through discipline, through the willingness to do what the masses will not do, to abstain when others indulge, to sit in silence when others fill every moment with noise, to fast when others feast. The promised land is in the skull. The milk and honey flow from personal glands. The journey has always been inward, and the walls fall when the siege stops. It is not out there, it is in you. Precious than gold, 2 substances actually.
Well, how interesting. Again, I just want to point out that this is not fact. I'm pretty sure that whoever, and I know that we will leave the link for that podcast because it really is Lady. It's super interesting information. I just made a few notes, in the beginning, they talk about the honey, of course, and what are we all doing? I mean, if you look behind my background right now, it's the honey, it's the honeycomb. The honey does not represent physical honey, but it represents total transformation, the gold within, right from lead to gold. So that would be the transformation within. And it's interesting that they won't use, that the honey they were able to preserve us for 3,000 years or something, right? Amazing. I think it's the only product on the planet that can do that. Another thing about astrology, and I think this is why it's important to notice how astrology of the heavens is used. It's not, I agree in the sense of that getting into the wrong hands with stuff like that is very dangerous. And perhaps God didn't want us to know our personal journey, but we see there astrology is really a map of the heaven. And there was quite a few, I know there are quite a few books already out there that make reference to that. So again, as above, so below, right? The destructive nature of alcohol. And again, any type of gluttony, which is or addiction, really, because if you look at any addiction, it's gluttony, really, and that's filling a black hole, a hole that feels like it can never be filled. So too much sugar would then create the same stages as alcohol, right? And I don't know what that stage is, sorry, I'm not a scientist, but that's what they were saying. Sugar, alcohol, anything like that. So that creates the destructive nature in the body as well. Fasting makes perfect sense, doesn't it? When you are able to fast and you are able to allow your whole system to reset, to cleanse, to purify, that would make perfect sense again. And of course, my favorite Bible verse, be still and know that I am God. And that is truly what it's about, the stillness of being, the remembering, the hum. And that's, of course, the stuff we speak about on many of the shows here on Solutions. So another thing I wanted to mention as well, and again, I know there's a lot of negative press, and call it that, that goes around about Kundalini. Kundalini is not evil. Kundalini is an energy force that resides within your body. And when you reach a certain state of consciousness, it's like the energy in your body starts vibrating at a certain level. And when your body fires the codes to say it's ready for transformation, Kundalini then activates within your body. And that's why they will use that, and I've mentioned this before, in the system for sex magic. So it's not Kundalini that's evil. It's what they do when they steal someone else's force of Kundalini. It's the life force within you. It's a powerful force. So there's nothing evil about it. And as they were saying, and I do agree with that, is that when you are ready and your energy rearranges itself, Kundalini activates naturally. And what happens then, it's like the dormant strands of DNA in your body start reconnecting. We have 12 strands of DNA, not 2. Scientists have termed the other 10 strands junk DNA. They don't know what it is. But what happens as you awaken spiritually, the DNA starts reconnecting like plugs being like a plug going into a power socket. Hair dryer, suddenly it works again, right? Same sort of thing. Now you can suddenly see things on a different level. You can understand things differently. You can observe it. You can connect with your body differently. You can view beyond the veils, beyond the third dimension, right? You start reclaiming your spiritual gifts. That's what starts happening. And that's exactly what they've not wanted us, which is why they've gone to such great lengths in the system when you're looking at survivors to literally destroy that and make that evil. Why do we think we do these? They do these things. They create the perception that anything like that is evil. Anything spiritual, any of your spiritual gifts are evil. And you shouldn't have them. Not yours to have. We know that's not true, right? So, look, the reason why I'm doing these kind of things is I really just want to have you guys, for those of you who find this interesting, think about it differently. As above, so below, as within, so without. We understand that our brothers and sisters in the dark have taken everything and inverted it. And remember, they manifest physically. God is a spiritual experience. Spirituality is a spiritual experience that occurs within you spiritually, naturally, energetically, as you evolve in your consciousness. So then you begin to understand more, you see more, you get more. It's a process of evolution, evolving. And I don't even want to say evolution because I don't even like that word. I'm just trying to find another, when we find that resonance, you go back to that state of coherence. You're in that state of what he calls that state of bliss, where you are so connected to your divine creator that you have no doubt whatsoever. And yes, meditation certainly does help you achieve that. That's why in the Eastern teachings, meditation is such an important part of their daily practice. And prayers, dialogue with the divine. Meditating is listening. So you pray and then you meditate to receive the answers to your prayer. How is God prompting you to find solutions for your life's challenges? God is not babysitting us anymore and making it all good for us. We've got to follow the prompts that we receive through the meditation and then act on it. That's what gets us through this. And that's really how we save ourselves. It's through a process of awakening of consciousness. So I hope that makes sense. And for those of you who didn't get the beginning, it's very interesting. Last week we did the first section. I'd just like to land this in 2 weeks. And love to hear your thoughts on this. How do you feel? See how it lands in your body. No decisions necessary. I'm just giving you my opinion. Use it, don't use it. Allow it, don't allow it. Whatever works for you. Yeah. And on that note, I will see you back in just over an hour with Taylor Northcott. He's that amazing guy that actually reads faces. So it's really good to have someone like that on the show as well. So catch us there on Ara Aquarius Rising Africa. Okay, guys, take it easy. God bless you all. And I'll see you a little bit later.